So here it is. It's 7:07. We're going to start off the East Lyme Inland Wetlands Agency. It's a regularly scheduled meeting for Monday, June 8th, 2020. I am Gary Upton. I'm the chairman, and in attendance we have Kristen Chantrell, the vice chair, Rosemary Ostfeld, along with one of our alternates, which we're going to seat, Mr. Diebel, I think. Although we will probably, if there's elements that we've gone into that you've not been around for, Mr. Diebel, we'll ask that you recuse yourself from that section. We've got our secretary, Phyllis, there she is, Phyllis Berger, and then Mr. David Schmidt. And we're moving over here for Doreen Ryan, an alternate that we'll have here seated this evening. And who else is seen here? Mr. Koch, a regularly seated member. Any other members I'm missing? I'm sorry, guys, it's kind of scrambly here.
Nope, I think you're good.
All right, good. And I've got a couple people in duplicate, so we'll just carry on. So tonight's meeting, we're going to hold it via Zoom, and no better example of a snafu for technical stuff than myself. I've got that little circle going like this on my computer, and it just doesn't want to cooperate. This evening, we're going to try and pop through this agenda. We'd ask that everyone just kind of be patient with any of these technical problems we might have. If things break up or you need to ask a question or hear it asked again, you can literally raise your hand. We were doing that last time. It worked fairly well. Although I cannot see anyone other right now than Jen, Kristen, and Rosemary. So that's making that a little bit difficult. Jen, you've got a good view of who's there, so you can help me with that. Tonight we've got Jennifer Lindo as staff. We've also got Sue Spang helping with the recording. So if Sue has a question, everybody, please make sure that we clarify for Sue's purposes that she's able to understand motions and things that might need to be called into the record. It looks like we have, there's Gary Gaishel in red. Hi, Gary. And we have our town attorney, Mr. Zamarka, underneath Linda GZ. Yeah, I think that's it. So let's start from the top. I'm just going to run this thing right through. We've got our agency seated. The two alternates are in, which is Jason and Doreen Ryan. Yes? So are there any additions to the agenda at this point from anybody?
Oh.
Seeing anything?
Yes, Attorney Garrity would like to speak. Just a moment, Paul. Let me unmute you.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, I note that Attorney Zamarka is present, and as part of my representation of English Harbor Asset Management, I know that we have a matter on the agenda. I'm not sure what Attorney Zamarka's intent are, but I have to make clear at this point from a procedural posture that pursuant to a consent decree in the federal court, the law firm of Waller, Smith, and Palmer and any members are not allowed to partake in any conversations or any deliberations involving my clients. And English Harbor Asset Management is one of the related entities under that consent decree. So again, you're welcome to have counsel advise you on other matters, but I'm going to ask that he turn off his Zoom, whatever we call these things, at that point in time.
So duly noted, and let's let Mr. Zamarka speak for himself. Attorney Zamarka.
I'll just say for the record, Paul, I am not aware of the specifics of the agreement you are referring to. I know in general there's something, but that happened before my time with the firm. As far as I know, I am not here to do anything with your client's application, so I don't foresee there being any issue.
Okay, I just want to make that clear. So, you know, if anything comes up down the road, but I will take Mark at his word at this point.
Yeah, and Paul, I do believe that, yes, Mr. Zamarka is not here to comment or assist us with your application at this time.
Thank you.
And I see Mr. Gaishel nodding his head to the same, so I think we're all on the same page, right, Mr. Gaishel?
That's correct.
Good. All right, so carrying on from there, so we don't have any additions to the agenda. I appreciate
You muted yourself.
I didn't mute myself, but there we are. Thank you, Paul, for bringing that up. We're moving forward to public hearings. At this meeting, we do not have any public hearings. Rosemary's got her light flashing already. It's a little early for that. We usually wait for the 4th hour to do that, Rosemary, the 4th hour of meeting. As for public hearings, to be clear for any people that are here, we will have our public hearing as it currently stands. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Lindo, July 13th is the public hearing for the update
Correct.
to our regulations.
Correct.
All right, good. Thank you. So moving on, public delegations. Public delegations are a time in which the members of the public are invited to speak to our commission about any matters. But when I say any, it is fairly specific. These issues or concerns related to approved wetlands permits and in-house proposals or general topics of discussion are open to comment. So meaning you can talk about stuff we've done, not stuff we're doing. Agenda items, the referrals, applications subject to a decision by the commission, a public hearing, or in litigation may not be discussed. Members of the commission will not directly answer your questions or make comment during delegations. So at this time, Jen had mentioned there's a bunch of people of the public. Keep in mind, public members, what I just read in, that, you know, this is not the time where if you have something, your question you might have about an application or something like that, this is not the time to talk about current standing applications. So Jen, do you want to see if, you want to run through the roll call of these public members, see if they want to?
I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to unmute everybody because now everybody should be available to speak if they choose to. And I'm going to ask, I'm just going to go down the list here of people that are not commission members and not part of an application. I see Camille Alberti. Camille, can you hear me?
I can. I'm just here to listen. No comments.
Okay. Mr. Beeman?
No comment. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Mingo? Joe, can you hear me? Nope. I don't know what's going on there. Got a couple other people. Alyssa? Oh, she muted herself. I have a Bill Seaman. Oh,
Did you mean Elisa LaCour?
yeah.
So I'm on I'm with Brian Kennedy. I'm at 21 Marshfield Road.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I think everybody else has muted themselves. I have a Ray Heller. Mr. Heller, did you have a comment?
Yeah, actually, it's Penny Heller. It's just my computer thinks I'm my husband. I just wanted to be sure that our comments from the Natural Resource Commission had been received. I think Gary took care of that. And our water report goes into the minutes of either this meeting or the next meeting so that it's officially recorded.
They will all be part of the public hearing on the 13th.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. I have a couple people by phone that I believe are just listening. Okay.
You want to just make sure that none of them, if you recognize maybe their last 4 digits, that they don't want to say something?
I don't, but they've been unmuted and they haven't, so.
Okay.
I would say if you're calling in by phone and you want to say something, please do so now.
All right, so I'm going to go into the assumption we don't have anything at this time during public delegation. If for any reason someone wanted to have spoken to the commission during public delegation, I'm sure as a commission we'd agree to go back to the item number 3 of our agenda. So if someone shows up and is misunderstood, by all means, please jump right in. We're going to move on to the meeting minutes of May 18th, 2020, our special meeting. If the fellow members of the commission have had a chance to look over those minutes to make sure that they reflect what we believe the agency conducted that evening. further, I'll add that because it was a Zoom meeting, the nice thing is we have a good recording of it. So the record really speaks for itself there. I think with considering the two, keeping this fairly, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of the May 18th special meeting?
So motion.
Raise a hand. Do I hear a motion? Yes, someone said so moved. And
David
then
Schmidt.
I would need a
David
second
Schmidt.
to that motion.
I can second.
All in favor of approving those minutes of the May 18th meeting, going through one at a time. Kristen Chantrell, do you approve those minutes, meeting minutes?
Yes, I approve.
Phyllis Berger, do you
Yes.
approve the meeting? Thank you. Rosemary?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Jason Diebel, you weren't there, but so we'll move on from Jason. David Schmidt?
Yes, I approve.
Thank you, sir. Doreen Ryan, you were there. Do you approve the minutes? Were you sitting as an alternate that night?
Yes.
Sure.
Yes, I was.
Okay. So
Do-
we'll move to Mr. Koch, if that's all right. Do you approve the minutes, sir?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, was there a question? I didn't mean to cut you off there if someone was saying something.
Dory,
I just had a question. Am I actually sitting tonight, or am I just observing? Because I'm the alternate, so I didn't know. I just want a clarification.
Go ahead, Gary has. Per our bylaws, I believe we can have up to 7 people seated at one time, Gary. So technically, you can be seated tonight with any of the new stuff. I would just ask that you recuse yourself for any of the anything you might be, here listening to or participating in that you've not been seated for all along. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Does that sound good, Mr. Gaishel?
I believe so. I think we have Don Finister, who's not here. He's the regular member. So either Jason or Doreen would be sitting for them.
Yep.
Doreen was on the
I don't know who you
sidewalks.
select. You have to identify which alternate is sitting currently for the regular meeting.
I don't know if there's like a
because Don
rotation that
wasn't-
has to happen,
Is
but
Don here yet?
No.
No, he's going to be late. He
Okay.
contacted me this afternoon.
it probably makes more sense if Doreen is seated since she was on the sidewalks and I was not.
Right.
Is that okay with you, Jason?
That's fine with me, yeah.
Okay. And you're welcome to obviously stay and hang out if you'd like.
I'll be
I don't
vice
know-
alternate.
All right. All right. Thank you. All right, great. So continuing on, we're good. And we're expecting Don Fimister to show up here momentarily, I'm guessing.
He didn't give me an approximate time. He had to work late, he said. So
Okay.
Okay, so I have a question then. So when Don gets here, then I recluse myself?
No, you could stay seated if you want.
you would
Okay.
wait for the chair to seat Don and return you to the audience.
Right. But I mean, she can, per our bylaws, I believe she can stay seated the whole time, can't she?
She could.
Yeah. So just stay and participate. What's another rational-minded person? You went on the sidewalk, like Rosemary, I think she said you went on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
We just ask you, use your judgment as to if you haven't participated fully in previous voting discussion on a matter, you can't be part of it. You have to step back.
Okay.
This is really fun when it doesn't work on your computer, just so you guys know. This is hilarious. Doing it all on the iPhone. All right, so are we good with it sounds like it's unanimously approved the minutes from the May 18th, 2020 meeting. Everyone is in favor. We're moving on. Our ex officio report would be Mr. Daigle. I don't see Mr. Daigle here, but there may have been additions to this meeting. Jennifer Lindo, you don't see Mr. Daigle here.
I do not see Paul Daigle.
Okay, so continue, but he's probably, or no, tonight they don't have a finance thing. I don't think so. So, did I hear something for someone? Sorry. So from that, we're going to move on to item number 6, pending applications, and discuss. The first item we're going to talk about are the inland wetlands regulations, changes to our regulations and updates. Team, what do we got to talk about here?
Okay, so based on the, if I may, Mr. Chair, based on the correspondence
Yep.
that we've gone back and forth due to some timing issues, we need to have a motion to rescind the previous motion of a public hearing on the June 8th.
Yep.
And then a second motion to schedule that public hearing for July 13th.
All right. Or you want to just do it, we could do it part and parcel in one, no?
I think that the suggestion we got from council was that it be two separate
All right,
motions.
let's do this. So
To
I
clarify.
myself will make a motion that we would remove or rescind the previous date of June 8th for our public hearing regarding our regulations. And with that, I'm going to ask, that's the motion I put forth.
I'll second.
Second motion from Rosemary Ostfeld. And then we're going to go into a quick vote from the top down. Kristen Chantrell, are you in favor? She can't hear me. Are you-
Sorry.
Yes.
Background
Sorry. Phyllis Berger in favor.
Are you looking, yes. Are you looking for a second?
We got a second. We're all in favor, say aye, but I'm just doing it
Oh,
I'm doing it the
aye.
technological way. Thank you.
Aye.
Let me see. Dave Schmidt.
Aye.
All right. And we're to Doreen Ryan.
Aye.
And sorry, guys, Mr. Koch.
Aye.
And Rosemary seconded, so clearly she's an aye, and myself. So all in favor of canceling out the June 8th date. If I missed anyone, please don't take offense, just yell at me. All right, so it's unanimous decision to put the down thumb on the June 8th date. So next motion in place, considering that's been canceled, I'd like to make a motion to host a public hearing on July 13th, 2020, so that we can hear the public's opinion of our proposed regulation change of changing our upland review area of 100 feet to 500 feet. Sorry, Sue, I'll just keep that short. The motion is to reschedule our public hearing to July 13th. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Who's that?
Phyllis.
That was Phyllis, that second.
Thank you, Phyllis. And from the top, all in favor, Kristen Chantrell,
Aye.
Rosemary Ostfeld,
Aye.
Phyllis again, you made the
Aye.
second. So aye, there we go. Dave Schmidt.
Aye.
Sorry here, Doreen Ryan.
Aye.
And Mr. Koch.
Aye.
All right, and obviously I myself am voting aye. So there we have it. Unanimously agreeing to have our public hearing on July 13th. Sue, are you good, Sue?
I'm good, thank you.
You're welcome, thank you. All right. So we have a few little pieces to continue on here. Our discussion and looking into the Nottingham Hills re-subdivision request of Kristen T. Clark, PE agent for owner, English Harbor Asset Management, LLC, for a determination of permitted/non-permitted activity at Upper Kensington Drive as part of a 4-lot re-subdivision, East Lyme Assessor's Map 40.0, Lot 23 and 22.
Mr. Chair, before we begin, I'm going to agree to Attorney Gary's request. Jen, how do I go about getting out of this and then getting back in when this portion's over?
You can just mute yourself, or you
can leave.
I can put you in a waiting room. I can put you in a waiting room. So I'll put you in the waiting room, and then when we're finished, I'll come back and get you.
Okay.
Yeah, make sure we don't forget.
He's already gone.
I'm just saying, let's make sure we don't forget him, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Okay.
So,
Attorney Garrity, you should be all set. You're unmuted.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, commission members, and particularly thank you for taking the site walk on Saturday. I hope it was helpful in educating you on the site and the conditions. We submitted to the staff a memorandum from Kristen P. Clark a professional engineer who is also a member of the English Harbor Asset Management LLC, which is the owner of the property. I just want to go through her background because she addresses some of the concerns that commission members had at the last meeting. She's a graduate of East Lyme High School, graduate of the University of Virginia with a BS in engineering, graduate of the University of Texas with a master's degree in civil engineering. She's a licensed engineer in the state of New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Vermont, and Maine. She holds an additional designation as professional traffic engineer, and some of the projects that she has worked on are the Dallas Cowboys Stadium, the Atlanta Falcons Stadium, and the San Francisco 49ers Stadium, as well as the Whittier Bridge, which is the bridge that crosses the Mass, New Hampshire, or is at the Mass, New Hampshire border, and the Kew Bridge in New Haven. She's presently civil engineer for the city of Manchester, New Hampshire, and her primary duties are public works projects, including road construction, design, and drainage and traffic matters. So we are seeking a determination that there is no jurisdiction by this commission. The septic design, as you may recall, is outside the wetlands buffer, so it is more than 100 feet. And I think there were some questions at the site walk on Saturday where folks were looking at the proposed lot development and asked whether the reserve system is to be built. And as we indicated, that reserve system, which is the closest part of any of this to the wetlands, is not to be built. It is a reserve, but as you'll see from Exhibit GG, which is the memorandum from Ms. Clark, the design and we are willing to submit with the Planning Commission on the re-subdivision application is that an advanced technology system known as GST septic systems would be used instead. It allows for a smaller septic design and system, so it would be even further from any of either the wetlands and or the buffer. At that point in time, in the package is a letter from Robert Scully, who is the Connecticut Department of Public Health person in charge of the public health and septic and sewer for the state of Connecticut. In that letter, it's from an earlier application from another developer. He signed off on the applications and recommended their use. You will also see a letter, so we think that the design of that septic system is not only robust, but is not going to have any impact whatsoever on the wetlands for two reasons, and I'll get to those in a second. Because it is going to be smaller. It's going to be a more sophisticated system than what is shown on the plans now. But moreover, because the septic system will be pitched away from the wetlands, the slope of all three parcels which would be developed is going down towards a driveway on the property and then into the rain garden. I do want to address one comment. I think one of the property owners was concerned that the rain garden would act as a mosquito breeding ground, and that's simply not the case. You'll see from the documentation that was submitted from NEMO, which is the University of Connecticut's program regarding responsible development, that the author of that article, who is also a professor and an expert at the University of Connecticut, talks about how to properly design rain gardens. And this rain garden is not at the lowest point. The idea behind the proper development of a rain garden is to make sure that it doesn't sit at the lowest point so that the water does not pool there. The idea behind it is to trap it coming down off any sort of slope and allow it to permeate down through the surface. So any surface runoff, whether it's from the roof or the driveway, is going to be directed in that area into that rain garden. And the idea behind the rain garden is to allow it to percolate down within 24 hours so you don't have standing water out there. So I think I wanted to dispel that myth about rain gardens essentially being a breeding ground for mosquitoes. The other what I'd like to point out here too is, despite the fact that we are proposing to the Planning Commission three houses on this property, we have actually, under the new regulations, been able to reduce the actual impervious surface substantially on that. On page 2 of Exhibit GG, there is an analysis by Ms. Clark regarding how each lot that's potential development is going to end up reducing. I don't know if that's I'm going to move it back a little bit because I may be getting a little feedback. I tend to talk loud.
Paul, I'm
yes.
sorry, I hate to interrupt you, but apparently I'm back in the meeting here and I don't want to.
Thank you, Mark.
Hold on just a second. All of a sudden, everybody just shifted. Okay, Mark is back in the waiting room.
Thank you. So there's no activities proposed either in the wetlands or within the buffer. All this activity is taking place outside, and that's why we're asking for a determination that not only is there no impact, but there's no activity, which would mean then that there's no public hearing, that the matter gets referred to the Planning Commission with a notice that you're declining jurisdiction because there is no activity that's regulated that is going to occur. Getting back to the analysis of the impervious surfaces, if you look at the bottom of page 2, you'll see that we've reduced the impervious surface by over 4,000 feet, just over 4,000, 4,150. And that's in part due to the new regulations.
Paul,
yes.
Could we have Ms. Lindo, could you pull that up so that the members of the public that might be watching can see?
Yep. Which one were we talking about, Paul? Which exhibit?
GG, which is the memorandum from Ms. Clark.
Sorry, and I didn't mean to stop you there. I just, if I'm sitting at home, they're going, what the heck's this guy talking about?
What page are we on?
Second page.
So Paul, could you start that explanation again, just so that we have a visual along with the audio?
Certainly. So presently, as it was designed and approved, there were proposed 2 driveways, and you see that area that was mapped out. Instead, under the new regulations, we can do away with having to have 2 separate driveways and have one driveway that parts or forks as it gets to the individual properties. And it allows us to shrink dramatically the impervious surface. So as a result of that, we've also, for the design of the houses have actually gotten a little bit smaller. So when you look at, for instance, lot 19, known as lot 1, as we were referring to on the site, the driveway area and the household footprint were 9,000 square feet in the original approved application. They are now 3,080 square feet. For lot number 2, the original impervious area was 9,000 square feet. That has been reduced to 3,580. Lot 3 has been reduced to 3,690. There was no prior lot 3 on there, so that doesn't, there isn't a reduction there. That's all that it only encompasses 3,690. And then lot 4, as was indicated, that lot is going to be donated, and there's a condition that would be placed on that into the, that's going to be donated to the East Lyme Land Trust on there. So I'd like to go through on page 3, we start with some of her analysis on here. So you should see in the attachments to that document in exhibit, let's make sure I've got it, exhibit 1, the elimination of the phase 3 plan inland wetlands approved clearing. There was clearing in the buffer zone allowed originally. Some of you may have been present when that was raised at the site walk on Saturday. That is being eliminated. There will be no incursion into the buffer area as a result of the new design. The construction of the rain garden, that will be a first treatment for stormwater impacting impervious surfaces on the property. It's to be developed property to be developed, including the roof. So any of that water runoff is not going to be heading towards the wetland. That water runoff will head towards the rain garden. In Exhibit EE, the grading and drainage and easement control plan was prepared by Ms. Clark. That is part of the attachment. The rain garden is a sufficient size, and I'm reading her analysis of this. So the rain garden is a sufficient size to comply with Section 5.2 of the Town of East Lyme subdivision regulations. That, as you may recall, the rain garden is something new that's required under the existing regulations, but I believe members of the commission had asked about whether that can be done, and we are doing that. Let me just find my, in addition, it'll serve as a landscape buffer between the proposed Lot 3 and the abutting property known as 26 Upper Kensington. She would note that the rain gardens are meant to and intended to filter pollutants from stormwater runoff and not act as detention ponds. That's also in the article that's attached from the University of Connecticut. Rain garden is designed to drain itself within 24 hours. On this property, the ability to do that is demonstrated by test hole 411 found on Exhibit BB in the attachments, which is located within the boundaries of the proposed rain garden and identifies the following favorable subsurface conditions. Test hole 411 on lot 21, Nottingham Hills. It is 0 to 4.6 inches of humus. From 20 to 22 inches, it's brown loamy sand. From 2 to 157, there are alternate layers of tan, brown, medium fine to fine silt sand and some stone. No ledge, no water at that level. Perk test located at 10 feet down gradient from the test holes reflects 4-inch minimum on there. The rain gardens, as we said, are not mosquito breeding grounds. I think I've covered that, but it also look at the article by Michael Dietz, which is the NEMO program director that I've referred to. The erosion control, we've added the silt fences to the 100-foot wetlands buffer in any area that presents a potential for erosion that would impact the wetlands or their buffer. That's during the construction phase, obviously. We will add a note on the plan that requires additional erosion and safety measures by requiring installation of staked hay bales in front of the silt fence, protecting the upland review area from any disturbed area that occurs within 25 feet of the upland review area. Again, it's an extra step to make sure that there isn't any siltation in that towards either the buffer area or the wetlands. In paragraph 5, she discusses the grading as evidenced by Exhibit FF. Elevations on the 3 developable lots on Exhibit EE. Drainage is directed from the impervious surface to the rain garden and away from the wetlands. In addition to the elevation of 100 feet, in addition, the elevation of 100 feet wetlands closest to the proposed house on lots 2 and 3 is actually higher than the, I'm sure the FF, I'm missing elevation, meaning that the backyards in these homes will rise slightly to the upland review area, directing the surface water down gradient towards the rain garden or to points furthest away from the wetland buffers. She would note that in this regard, we are not changing the existing elevations and drainage courses which presently drain these areas away from the wetlands and buffers. The use of the advanced technology system, and this is important because I think that was the main concern that this commission had, and this is paragraph 6, I'm sorry, trying to keep track of the screen moving up and down and read my notes at this, or the memo at the same time, because I think there was some concern that the surface water or groundwater might impact the wetlands, and I'm going to address that from a legal standpoint when I go through the memorandum we submitted earlier today, just about what the commission may consider. In any event, the use of advanced technology septic systems, the geomatrix design GST septic system will allow for far less leaching area than the one shown on the current re-subdivision plan. This will reduce the leaching area by more than 50% and approximately 60 feet currently from the, by more than 50% or more from the 60 feet currently shown on using the GTS product. The system provides for a greater surface area in far less space and maximizes water aeration, which also helps with the attenuation before it reaches any of the boundary lines. We will add a note on the final plans requiring the use of the GTS septic system on each of the proposed 3 buildable lots in this re-subdivision. She's enclosed information on the geomatrix GST system, as well as the letter from Bob Scully, which I referred to, supervising sanitary engineer for the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. That's Exhibit 4. She would also note that, for the record, that the state of Connecticut Department of Health requires a 75-foot drinking setback from drinking water wells to a septic system. And that's important because They're concerned about making sure there's an adequate separation distance from septic systems for drinking water, not for wetlands or not for the wetlands buffer, but for water that these folks are actually going to drink. And I think that's important when we consider whether or not there's going to be an impact from any of these septic systems on the wetlands themselves. So the conclusion is that it poses no risk to the wetlands or any of the associated properties nearby. The National Diversity Database, this again will be a matter from the legal perspective I'll cover in my memo. She has obtained and reviewed the National Diversity Database area maps dated December 2019. Those are attached as Exhibit 5, and it demonstrates that there's no protected or endangered species or areas located near the subject property. Finally, the tree canopy, this is number 8, the existing tree canopy identified on the re-subdivision plan highlighted in green, Exhibit 6, will not be changed or altered. And we will make a note on the plans as part of any approval with planning. That would be the case. And if the Wetlands Commission is so desirous of that, that would be fine. So it is her professional opinion that none of the proposed activities identified on the proposed plan will likely impact or affect the physical characteristics of the wetlands on the subject property. We've taken, and I would agree with my clients on this and with the engineer, we've taken great care in the preparation of this to avoid any such activity. We've tried to avoid any activity within the buffer, which we have done. We've followed all the guidance provided by the town of East Lyme's inland wetlands regulations, state of Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection regulations and guidance, which includes the pamphlet. And I think that this commission, I certainly know when the regulations were drafted, I believe this commission relied upon that guidance as part of it. I don't know if any of the current members have seen it, but it's available on their website, and it makes suggestions, which one of the suggestions in here, as Ms. Clark notes, is that they do not recommend buffers beyond 100 feet, except when there's a designated special area of concern, and that has not been done in this particular case with these wetlands. They're simply identified as wetlands and subject currently to a 100-foot buffer. We've also addressed potential issues that could have affected the wetlands, which include but are not limited to drainage by directing the stormwater from impervious surface to the rain garden, which is located 155 feet at its closest point, but not its lowest point, which is located approximately 180 feet from the closest wetlands boundary, meaning the buffer, not erosion and sediment control, retaining the existing tree canopy, and reduction of proposed impervious surfaces, and the use of the highly efficient septic systems. I think based on that the applicant has demonstrated that not only is there not jurisdiction over the application that's proposed before the Planning Commission, because everything is taking place outside the wetlands, but the applicant has also demonstrated, I think, clearly that there isn't going to be any impact on the wetlands themselves or on the wetlands buffer, which leads me to my memorandum. I think it is Exhibit FF, but I'm not 100% sure, Jen.
I believe it is.
All right, I mean, HH, I'm sorry, thank you. And it doesn't need to be brought up on the screen, but because I can go through it rather quickly here, but because this is an application for determination of whether the commission has jurisdiction, if the commission is going to find that it has jurisdiction, it must state on the record that there is a finding of significant impact. In order to make a finding of significant impact, the commission would require expert testimony on that particular subject matter in order to demonstrate that, in order then to be able to hold a public hearing. You cannot hold a public hearing unless there's a determination that there is significant impact as a result of the application. And when we talk about that, what the courts have said is a finding of adverse or significant impact has to be supported by substantial evidence in the record and expert testimony. So the other issue too is the courts have covered the issue of the upland review area. The upland review area is in of itself not subject to protection per se. The purpose of the upland review area is to protect the wetlands and the wetlands alone. when activity takes place in the upland review area, then your jurisdiction comes into play to make sure that that activity within the buffer area, which in this case is 100 feet, poses a significant impact on the wetlands. Since that's clearly not the case here, it's our position that the commission has to decline a finding of jurisdiction and refer this to the Planning and Zoning Commission, saying that there is no jurisdiction, largely, if not only because the applications demonstrated there isn't going to be any particular harm here, but that any activity is outside the wetland buffer and the wetland boundaries themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Fellow commissioners, I think we've heard from Paul about this matter. Mr. Gaishel, would turn to you for your comment on Paul's comments, please.
As Mr. Garrity pointed out, all of the activity is being proposed outside the 100-foot upland review area. I would concur that it does not require a permit. There's an extensive amount of information that was submitted. Again, with that said, if the agency determines that no permit's required, I would just note that the Planning Commission within its subdivision regulations will evaluate the application accordingly and will evaluate the erosion sedimentation controls. So I would anticipate that the applicant will submit exactly what he submitted here to that agency, maybe with some minor revisions. Typically those will only result in more erosion controls or things to that nature. I mean, again, the town engineer, Ledge Light, a number of departments will be reviewing that planning permit application. That's all I have.
So, Mr. Gaishel, I have some questions for you. And I don't mean, I'll see if any of the other commissioners might as well. But I'll start and see if, please guys, raise your hand. I've got everyone on the screen now, so that old-fashioned way of putting our hand up might work. Was there a public hearing for this application originally?
For the first 3-4 phases, yes.
Okay, so in the decision-making process or the application process, there were deemed a certain amount of lots, I would presume. And again, I've not reviewed the original application, which I would like to do, and understand the record that was originally put forth, the record that there would be, so that we can put forth an intelligent statement here. Rather than, I feel like we're just focusing on this little minuscule piece of information that we could be perhaps going against something that was outspoken against before by the public. So you're saying there was a public hearing before inland wetlands for this subdivision and the decision of these lots?
No, not for the proposed four lots. There was no public hearing, hasn't been held yet. For the previous
the original two. Sorry, I don't mean this one.
So the original 2 lots, yes, those were approved as part of I think it was phase 3 or 4 of
which went before public hearing, which had a public hearing. Okay.
Correct.
So
I'll just qualify that statement. Whether or not I had a public hearing before the wetland agency back then, it was before my time, so I can't speak to that. I'd have to go back and research the files, but Mr. Garrity can, I think.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I can answer that. There was a public hearing on this on these 2 lots as part of the application. There were a series of phases. This was one phase. I think this was phase 3, and there was a wetlands permit issued at that time.
Okay.
But keep in mind, again, we were cutting in the buffer area, so that would be part of the reason we had to go get a permit.
Okay. All right. So, and I don't want to go into speculate how that went, and we probably should have some further information. Also, Paul had mentioned, not having any expert testimony regarding a significant impact. Is this not a good example of when we might want to enlist Mr. Gaishel, our own expert, to give us some information about the weighing out the impact here?
That's up to the commission. If the commission would like me to draft recommendations or suggestions, I certainly could. I think it's just a matter of the commission determining based on the site walk and the testimony before you, whether or not the activity needs a permit. That decision's not up to me. It's up to the agency.
Right. I'm just fellow commission members. Does it make sense I'm just trying to be logical here. There was a public hearing to get this thing chopped up into however many lots it was. Here we are back, kind of, not to say back room, but we've not noticed the public, the very same public that we're given the opportunity to say something at that point, and we're chopping up the loaf a little bit more without them knowing about it. That to me feels, and I understand we could say, well, jurisdiction, and all we're asking is that you decide if the thing that we're putting forth is going to have an impact on the wetland. I understand, and I understand that completely. But it seems that if this was an approval built off of a prior public hearing, that the same should happen again, is my rationale. Please, by all means, somebody grab the microphone.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
this
sir.
Is a new application, and I would say that the landowner has a right to develop his land. If he has the land area available to meet the density requirements, and he has the ability to meet the subdivision requirements, he's entitled to make application for subdivision and or re-subdivision. All I can tell you is that the inland wetland regulations regulate activities within 100 feet of the wetlands and watercourse. The applicants proposed activities outside the 100-foot upland review area. I think, based on what the applicant has proposed in terms of site development plans, assuming the erosion sedimentation control plan is followed, there should be no impact to the inland wetlands.
I have a comment.
Yeah, me too.
Doreen, Ryan, yes?
Well, Rosemary said it first. She can go first.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think, we did notice on the site walk that we counted, I think 10 or 11 people from the public that did attend the site walk. And so it might just be good to clarify, if they wanted a public hearing, what are the procedures that they would have had to have done if we were going to take that avenue? Like, what is it, 25 people need to sign something? Like, I just want to be clear. So if, for the people who are on that walk, if hypothetically we decide, okay, we don't have jurisdiction, like, I think that it's important to explain to the public that attended that site walk for wetlands, why or why not we weren't, it stopped there. Does that make sense to people?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Attorney Garrity did raise his hand.
Yeah, if I might respond, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, please, by all means.
So I think we may be confusing some of the issues here. First, in terms of the Inland Wetlands Commission, the rules are clear. And I'll back up a little history here, is that phase 3 included all of Upper Kensington and Kensington Drive. So there was a public hearing before the Inland Wetlands Commission, and there were a number of areas that were addressed with. But with respect to this particular lot, having 2 approved houses, we did receive a permit at that point in time, part of which, because as I said earlier, we were going into the buffer area, and that would have required us to come before the commission regardless. That said, right now, we're actually retracting that and saying we are not doing anything within the wetlands. We're simply dividing the lot up into 3. There will be a public hearing. We have to go before the planning and, I always forget whether East Lyme is planning and zoning or planning.
It's separate.
It's separate, thank you. We have to go before the planning commission for a re-subdivision hearing. So a lot of the other issues in terms of whether it should be 2 or 3 will be addressed at that point in time. But what we're asking of this commission now is to say, in light of what the regulations require and what the law says, is if we are not undertaking any activity in the wetlands, will this commission agree with us that there is no regulated activity that this commission has jurisdiction over? That's part 1. Part 2 is a procedural aspect. I don't think right now, as the chairman noted earlier, this is not a public hearing. This is a public meeting, so that you can't poll the public as to whether or not they would like a public hearing. What you are obligated to do is, based on the evidence before the commission, make a finding that there is no activity that is regulated, and therefore send that referral to planning. Or if you decide that there is regulated activity taking place within the buffer or within the wetlands, then you may need to make a finding that it's significant and requires a public hearing. There's nothing in the record right now to support doing that.
Right. I suppose to clarify why I'm, scratching my mind about this is I don't know if the prior public hearing was contentious. I'm not asking for you to tell me if it was or it wasn't.
Before my time as well.
Right. So to me, it's a little bit of an assumption of whoever those people were, the citizens of the town that may or may not have been there. To me, I would certainly, if I were one of those people, I'd feel like this was a workaround. I mean, I think that's that's just how I would feel. If again, I'd be assuming to say they existed. Perhaps there was nobody. And if there wasn't anybody, then they wouldn't feel that way. That's where I get stuck.
I understand. I wanted to point out one thing though, in the declaration of covenants and restrictions that all the folks are subject to who purchased on that street.
Yes.
The declaration makes clear that the developer is capable of further subdividing the parcels. I mean, this is fairly typical. You see it in condominiums where we can do additional stages. We can do this. In this particular case, the document that's at book 678, page 650, the actual paragraph I'm referring to is at 655. We reserve the right to further subdivide any of these particular lots. And that essentially became a possibility with the new subdivision regulations that have conservation in mind. And we've been able to do some of that additional development with conservation in mind by reducing the size of the property, the houses, and reducing the impervious surfaces, all the while taking additional steps in terms of protecting both the buffer area and the wetlands and the environment overall, just frankly due to some betterments in technology.
Sure.
I think that there are some, oh, go ahead, Ted.
So I just wanted to be clear that the people who were there on the sidewalk with us, there's going to be a public hearing, not in front of our board necessarily, but in front of zoning, where they will have a chance to weigh in, right?
Planning,
Planning
or zoning, or both.
In front of planning, and it's mandatory. It requires a public hearing, no way around it.
In which case, if they were to, as Rosemary was alluding, have numerous people that were concerned, they can air their grievances there, of course, right?
Correct.
Now, understanding that, and I think I'm seeing is that your hand raised, Ms. Chantrell? You're muted. Hold on.
That's me. Okay, I'm not muted anymore, right? Okay. I just have a couple concerns that I would just like to express to the commission. I know that this is outside the 100-foot buffer, and I would say if we move forward with not saying that we needed a permit for this application, I would just like to make sure that there's a lot of oversight on this property because of the steep ledge and because the proposed house number 1 is literally like 5 foot off the 100-foot upland review area. That I think during construction, it's going to be inevitable that you're going to encroach upon that that buffer zone, and that with that ledge right there, I think that we have to be really careful that there's not any overflow down into the wetland area during construction. And then I also just wanted to say on the record, I'm just curious who would be maintaining that rain garden that's going to be developed in that area.
It's designed to maintain itself, essentially. The article that's discussed from Nemo talks about how to design these so that you're not going in. For instance, there's no catch basin that will fill up or has to be filtered out. It uses plantings and so forth that would be natural to that, which would essentially allow that the water to dissipate. In addition, the amount of water that's coming off there isn't going to be that sufficient that that it requires routine maintenance, but ultimately there will be restrictions in the deeds to the homeowners, similar to the driveway maintenance, that will, so that we don't have disputes. And essentially the law, I don't say one requires that now, but we do that as developers. We put that in there so that there aren't disputes down the road. Because if you sell one lot, guy comes in to buy lot 2 and he goes, hey, wait a minute, who takes care of this? And so it's spelled out clearly. There are in Exhibit GG at the end, there are some notes from Ms. Clark about notes that would be placed on the plans by the Planning and Zoning Commission. And this is frankly typical, that they will require the wetlands boundary to be, the buffer area to be staked and flagged so that, and be reviewed by the inland wetlands officer prior to construction to make sure that there are no incursions in there. If you recall from being on the site on Saturday, the driveway is going to be the main access that's in there, the rough driveway. It's going to be the main access point to the construction of the houses behind it. There was a fairly significant amount of distance between that improved area and the actual erosion and settlement control material that was established already, which is just above the buffer area itself. So.
Yeah, I think for the abutting neighbors, rain gardens look really nice when they're initially put in. I just get, down the road would hope that they would not become an eyesore for the neighbors that currently live there.
What about Ms. Chantrell and Paul, and you can weigh in here, but are there any other alternatives as to where that rain garden could be put? And is your client, amenable to potentially, and I'd like to actually say to our commission, I'm sure I'll get some open eyeballs on this one, but how do we feel about it being on the other? I'm looking at the elevations and understanding the elevations of the site. How do we feel about putting it on the other side of the driveway? Seeing as it's, again, for the public, that are listening that can't participate, it's not a detention pond. That's what Paul's explaining. It's not like the thing everyone's seeing at Costco with standing water in it. This is a rain garden. The water's supposed to be out of there fairly quickly. Again, if it's maintained, those are concerns. But does anyone have any input and thoughts on where it could potentially go? Again, okay. Mr. Koch, I saw your hand.
Yeah, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I think that we can't get to that question
Understood.
Until we decide whether we have jurisdiction.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. I guess I'm just asking, Paul. You're right, Ted.
So let me respond to that. No, and I don't mean to be flippant. We've looked at the area, and in order to avoid impact or any potential claim of impact on the wetlands, that is the most appropriate area, because without disrupting the site too much, it allows us to channel the water. There, as I mentioned earlier in Ms. Clark's report, there's a natural divide as you come down that hill, and by placing the houses where we did, we're able to then, without disrupting the land that would slope towards the wetlands, make sure that the water channels down to that. There obviously is a maintenance agreement with the neighbors, as I said to this, and the idea, though, and I think this is what the NEMO article points out, is you don't want to make these things where they have to be maintained or they look like something obvious, with a fountain, whatever. It's designed essentially to be as minimal as possible in order to accomplish the goals. One issue to address Ms. Chantrell's comments, as I said in the exhibit GG, there's notes that are going to be proposed on, or will be provided and required on the development plans that are approved by the Planning Commission. The first is to construct prior to construction of any house, the applicant will flag the limits of the upland review area and install erosion and sediment controls. On the plans and notes contained herein, they will have those items inspected by the town prior to construction. So what that means is when the contractor comes in and he has a set of plans and he's looking at that, he's going to have to contact the town to come out and make sure and verify that the flags out there are in the correct location. Any area within 25 feet of the buffer in which silt fence is identified on the plans will have additional stakes, so that if the contractor somehow backs up, he knows that, just like you're backing up your car, you're getting too close. It's going to be staked out there. The other, and we'll stake that with hay bales so that they're obvious. The other issue is that we're going to require on the plans, any homeowner comes in, they'll have Geometrics GST leach fields. So the homeowner is not going to have a choice when they buy this, or whomever is not going to have a choice. That is going to be a requirement of the design for the septic. And that will end up going back to Ledgelight again for subsequent approval at that point in time. And we'll note on the plans that, as I've noted earlier, that the existing tree canopy will be maintained on there. So there are precautions that can be taken, and typically the Planning Commission will, in addition to any special conditions it imposes, will oftentimes have a litany of other construction-related issues that it requires to be printed on the plans, and it requires the applicant to adhere to prior to, during, and after the commencement of construction.
Right. And again, remembering that we are, oh, sorry, Dave, but remembering that we are understanding if we're figuring out the jurisdictional question, right, Ted?
Correct.
One
Yes.
thing, I'm just still looking at the plan, and I understood that the roof leaders were all going to this rain garden, but it looks like the proposed houses 3 and 4 actually run off the back down towards the wetland back there. From
the leaders in the front go in that direction. Lot 2 and Lot 3 go to the back, where in the area where we walk down the hill to the cart path.
Yep. And then the proposed house number 4, which is not going to exist, clearly won't have a roof going into this this rain garden.
That's correct.
Okay.
Just one quick question.
Yes.
Who maintains the title or ownership of the parcel of land where the rain garden is?
You could give me 1 second.
Lot 3, I believe.
It is Lot 3. It's on Lot 3's property.
I wasn't sure whether they actually would own the pond or the rain garden or not.
No, they will own it, but typically what we will do, and somebody might walk in and say, I don't want that on my property. I'm not going to buy the lot. And that's fine. That's something you deal with. But we, for instance, with common driveways and things like this, we will draft a fairly detailed agreement on this, because we could sell lot 1 and we could own lots 2 and 3 for a period of time, and the owner of lot 1 may not be happy. So we try and draft these agreements so everything is clear, everybody knows what their rights and obligations are, so we don't have disputes down the road.
Well, and I'm just curious, what if somebody future down the road, lot 3, 4 owners from now, decides to do something there and doesn't bother with a permit? Is there any deed restriction that it must remain?
The language that we're talking about will be in a deed restriction. So it will reference everybody. And like my property, if my neighbor puts up a shed somewhere I don't like it, I can go complain about it. So
I think, is it possible to put that, like, if we do decide that this is not within our jurisdiction, that the point that Dave just brought up, that's very clearly written in our decision? That we ensure.
Sure. I mean, we're going to do it, so we're happy. I don't see it as an imposition.
And then I think one thing that's making me the footprints of the houses have decreased quite a bit since the original application. Is there a way to make sure that those footprints stay the same? Or, is that if we end up saying, okay, we don't have jurisdiction since you've reduced the amount of impervious surfaces by, 5,000 square feet, can we make sure that, all of a sudden it comes before planning and we're not going to see those 2,000 foot houses again? You know what I mean? Can we just make sure that they're going to stay at that?
I don't think that you can. The Planning Commission may. I mean, there are.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying, and it gets too complicated in terms of actual restrictions on the size of the lots, because the courts have said that gets into a whole nother topic, exclusionary zoning, et cetera, et cetera. If you say it's got to be so big or it can't be too big, or I don't think there's any means by which this commission could do that, but that's something that the Planning and Zoning Commission can review. One of the other things to consider too is we have building square and setback requirements that we have to make. I mean, even with these houses, we're fine on the setbacks. But I can't tell from, I'm assuming because we have houses on here, the building square would work. The other issue too is the septic designs are a function of the size of the house or the number of bedrooms. So that is a factor in there.
And just to state clearly again, we were looking at the document over the weekend when we did the site walk. We noticed that the reserve tank was about 1 foot outside of the upland review. But now, since the weekend, we have a revised proposal where you're saying that it's 60 feet away from the edge of the upland review with this new type of sewage system.
Rosemary,
Yeah.
I think what he said, what was originally shown as a 60-foot long septic system proposed for the reserve on that lot would now be reduced to 28 feet.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. That's helpful.
Right. And keep in mind, the reserve area is just an area marked on the ground by the engineers to say that if we have to replace this, we could use this land here. There's nothing there until there's a failure.
So, Paul, in the question and clarification by Dave there, also Rosemary to Dave to you, that 60-foot area as it's reduced in length does bring it away from the review line, right?
Yes, it does.
That's,
Okay.
I think it's important to just really clarify what we saw over the weekend versus what we're seeing now and how that's going to weigh into our decision making.
Right. So I don't have a ruler in front of me, but if you were to look at the reserve area, it goes down essentially to a test pit known as, or marked as 332, and it's just to the southwest of that. That reserve area is going to go back by about half of that that's shown on the map.
Okay.
But keeping in mind, Commission, that if we're deciding if we have jurisdiction or not, these are all fun details to discuss, but really correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Koch, we're deciding if we have jurisdiction, which is really a yes/no answer. And as such, we can't really require them to do anything if we decide we don't have jurisdiction here.
That's right.
Yeah, that's the way I see it.
Yeah. So, but thankfully, it seems like Paul and his applicant are very flexible and understanding of these concerns. And we do appreciate the conversation.
Yeah.
You're nice to work with.
You know, we prefer an approach to try and do what we can to make the commission happy and get our application approved. So
yeah, so thanks for workshopping things that are outside of the question. I mean, we'll try. I think. Do you guys want to keep on this, or should we? Any other questions from the commission need to be discussed? 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, I'm all mixed up tonight. My order is messed up. All right. Well, so.
Can I make a motion?
Please do.
I have nothing further than at this point.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, that's
Are you
okay.
done, Paul?
I'm done.
All those niceties, we forgot formalities.
It's all right. It happens.
Mr. Schmidt.
I was going to make a motion that given what we've seen and all the information presented and the fact that it has reduced the coverage substantially, even going to 3 houses as opposed to the approved.
And this is all preamble, right?
The motion is that there is no impact on the wetlands or the upland review area, and therefore I feel we do not have jurisdiction in this issue.
Okay, so Sue Spang is looking like she's getting to work with her pencil.
So if you could
Let's
just
help.
state the motion without anything extra.
That given what we have seen in the testimony, there is no need for us to require an application. We have no jurisdiction.
Does that make sense, Sue? We'll give you a second. We'll let you maybe give it back to us.
Yeah.
If you want me to re-wordsmith it, I will.
If that's, if what you're saying is what you want to say, that's fine.
That's read word Schmith it, you mean.
I was thinking that too, but I didn't say it.
Out.
Oh.
Okay, not in. So what I got from that is no need for us
That we have no jurisdiction. I make a motion.
to
that
require
we-
a permit because it is not in our jurisdiction. I believe that's what you said.
Correct.
Given the updated proposal, I think it's important to clarify that, if that's how you feel, David.
Given all the information we have.
All the information is the best way to say it.
Okay, cool.
Mr. Gaishel, do you have any comment on that, sir?
No comment.
That meets your standard?
I think it's pretty clear that he's made a motion that no permit's required.
Okay. And Sue, you have that?
Yep.
All right.
Need a second.
Second.
Mr. Koch seconds the motion. And now, all in favor from the top down, Ms. Chantrell,
Aye.
Ms. Rosemary Osfeld,
Aye.
Phyllis Berger.
Aye.
Jason is technically still seated, but he didn't site walk, so we're skipping him. Mr. Schmidt made the motion, and it's an aye, I'm sure.
Aye.
Mr. Koch, aye. Sorry, he second. Doreen Ryan?
Aye.
And as the chairman, I also, so it's a unanimous decision to approve that motion.
Thank you all very much for your time and attention.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. I will leave at this point, I guess. Yeah, there we go.
Adios.
If they could all be that easy to work with, right?
I'm gonna,
It was flexible. That was,
Don't forget to bring in.
I was gonna say, I'm gonna add Attorney Zamarka back in.
There he comes.
in the waiting room. In the corner.
Middle place.
Hey, if that he's easy to work with. That's nice. I have to say, even with contentious things, right? That's putting a bookend on the Nottingham Hills re-subdivision request. We're going to move on to item C, the pending applications, which we have agreed that we've combined, Mr. Gaishel, with C and D essentially, right?
Correct.
These are being treated as one item, and we have Mr. Kennedy, I believe, is here, and
Yes.
Elisa LaCours is one of the property owners over there.
I'm representing the property owner.
Right, thank you. So we're on this matter. Were we referring to it as 21 Marshfield, your brother's keeper, or the other, or they're both combined, right?
Both, because it involves both lots.
All right, so just for the public and for the record, item C on our agenda is 21 Marshfield Road, your brother's keeper, LLC, agent for owner Brandy and Derek Moore for a determination of a permitted non-regulated activity at 21 Marshfield Road for the clean out of a culvert entrance and exit to maintain the natural flow of water, East Lyme Assessor's Map 04.7, Lot 19. And further, item D, Creeks Road, Giants Neck Heights Clubhouse, your brother's keeper, LLC, agent for owners, Giants Neck Height Association, for a determination of a permitted non-regulated activity at Creek Road for the clean out of a culvert entrance and exit to maintain the natural flow of water, East Lyme Assessor's Map 04.7, Lot 18. So moving on Saturday, we obviously went and took one of our site walks here, took a look at the site, and noticed some, obviously a significant load of Phragmites. We've previously discussed this application at our last meeting. And yeah, so I want to open it up for any questions that commission might have. I myself have a few pictures that I'd like to enter for the record, if possible. Jen, I'd like to, if I can, share my desktop.
Hold on, give me just a sec.
Yep. And I have neatened up my desktop so that there are only folders pertaining to tonight's meeting, just to be clear. So I'm going to share my screen, if that's all right, just for the commission and members of the public that might be looking, more importantly, just so that this is open, to just show the pictures of this location. In the event that any of also the members that are here seated didn't get the time to see it, and as a group discussion and a reminder of what we're dealing with. So here I am, I'm clicking share screen. Sorry, guys. And now it wants me to do a whiteboard, which is not what I'm interested in doing, Jen, sorry. It's acting up again. Sorry, guys. Can you guys see anything yet?
No.
No.
This update for Zoom has made my computer crazy. Fun, right?
The new reality.
Yes. The new alternate reality. All I'm getting is whiteboard option, Jen.
You should be able, at the bottom, you should see a green button that says share screen.
Yeah.
And when you click on that, a window should pop up that has a bunch of different options that you can do the white screen or whatever it is that you were looking. You have to have the pictures open on your desktop.
Yep,
already.
they are.
You should be able, when you click on the share screen icon, you should have it should show you what your pictures are that you can click it.
Yeah.
But you're on a Mac, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm not, so maybe that's...
You Windows people love to rub it in at this point.
Well, those aren't real computers. Those are just for kids.
That's right.
Hey, there we go. There you are. See it now. You're good.
All right. Cool. How's that working for you?
There you go.
You want to see a little bigger one, though?
Yes, please.
Let's see. Let's do this. All right. So what we're looking at, I believe, are obviously the Phragmites that are on, as you're pulling down the road, they're on the left side of the road. And here we are looking out further onto the marsh. Got a picture of essentially the marshland and the water as it runs in. And again, another shot of the same green stuff. I took this picture actually today. I went back and just drove through there because, I had nothing to do with my spare time other than drive around and look at stuff like this. And
Prepare for the wetlands meeting.
this is just a little bit of evident, pooling of water and sedimentation that's probably happening for road runoff. This is where the little under road pipe there is completely buried. It's really not doing its job. There's a close up of the same. Moving on to even a better close up. And there we're looking at where some of the Phragmites are getting ready to go crazy and probably go down there right now and listen to them grow. Here's the other side where the fresh water is coming in. And you'll see you can actually see the water moving if this were a video. Another shot of the same. There's the road, and right here is where that little pipe is running. Yeah. I noticed this pipe, it was running over there too. Who knows what that's for? I think it's pretty small.
Yeah, I've seen that. I haven't figured that out at all.
Yeah, Brian, I kicked to the end of it and it looks like it's just kind of buried in the ground. I said, okay, well, it's not really doing anything.
Extra pipe.
Yeah. I thought of pulling it out, but then I was like, well, I don't know. I just leave it. I don't know how it goes.
Yeah. One thing I noticed and is evidenced here from the sediment, right, is clearly there's a significant water pooling in here, probably from that torrential rain, which coincided with a high tide.
Right. I sent Gary Gosho a video where it showed after a torrential rain, the water comes across the driveway right there.
Yeah.
And it's only because all the road runoff up above comes into the ditch that comes into the creek right there.
Yeah.
So all the water from the road and it just overwhelms because the culvert's blocked.
Yeah.
And there's no place to go. So it goes into the driveway. And I just wanted to know behind what's 21 Marshfield, if you looked at the aerial photo that they actually had with our GPS maps, where his boat is now, he used to have the boat parked down by the telephone pole. But if he did it now, it'd be stuck.
Yeah.
And on the other side of the telephone pole, he used to have his trailer, but he can't even get in there now. That was just because last year we had all that rain, and it just overwhelmed that area. Before we knew it, it's just all wet.
Yeah, might I make a suggestion too? And again, this is not what you're asking about, but if you've got a little bit more after you do your cleanup, obviously if you get some more material in here. You can see there's certainly a big depression in here. It might help you get some of that runoff getting, rather than it settling on your road there. Just a thought, because I mean, here's a close up of that area. It's a big. Oh, that picture disappeared. Here come window users. Go ahead, poke fun. There we go. But I mean, it's a big area. So, it was nice to be able to see that, which we didn't see the day of our site walk. So I was glad that I went back and saw evidence to the fact that there, I'm sure it's a lot of water for it to leave that bit of dirt behind.
Yeah.
It turns into a lake.
Yeah.
It's bad when it rains hard.
Yeah. We can see that. There it is. See the same spot, guys, right there. So I was thinking, after you do some cleanup, maybe get some more material in there if you got that area up a couple inches, you even gravel, the water might sit below the gravel, but at least you won't, you got to operate in there.
Yeah.
So I guess that's it. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, you guys. Go ahead. Sorry. Unless anyone wants to see one of those pictures.
No.
Go ahead.
I think, just to summarize, it seems like, overall the applicants are interested in remedying some of this Phragmites, which is obviously invasive, and just want to improve the overall drainage of the area, which makes sense, especially seeing some of the photos and where, just from your anecdotal evidence, some of the water is pooling on the site. So I guess, as an agency, do we think that they should have an expert come in to help them a little bit with this, or where do we feel like we're at here?
Well, today, are we just determining if they need a permit?
That's our first step, yeah.
Let's, I think we should,
Schmidt's raising his hand.
Sorry, I can only see 4 people. Can I just comment on that real quick, Dave?
Sure.
When we were there, I was looking at Brian's, remember guys, I grabbed my phone, I was looking at Brian's plan. And honestly, I would have probably drawn a lot bigger area than Brian did. He's actually, if he sticks to what he says, he's fairly conservatively, he's only going in, I think it was 20 feet, the area that was hatched marked, and some areas were cutting. So I thought that was, I respect that. It's not like the guy wants to go all the way into the marsh,
Right.
Sorry, Dave, go ahead.
I was just going to say, as long as he's just doing a little cleanup, but if it involves anything beyond that, I think he clearly might impact the wetlands. But if he's just clearing out a very minimal amount, to me, it's not an issue, but anything beyond that, he's got to come back.
Yep.
That makes sense.
Can I make a comment? Whoops. Hello.
Hello.
There she is. Sorry.
Okay. Well, one of my comments is to Gary Gaishel, since they're going to be working basically in the wetland, whether or not they need a permit from the DEEP.
Jen, did you unmute him?
Because it's a tidal wetland.
Yeah, I asked if I could unmute Gary. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, the applicants would be required to approach DEEP to find out if they need any permitting through them, being that it's, there might be work on the outlet side of the pipe, which is on the salt marsh side. I don't believe that they would need any permitting from the Water Resources Bureau in regards to inland wetlands, because that's the local jurisdiction. So the agency would just determine if, in regards to the inland wetland, whether or not a permit was required.
Okay, because I know when we did our pond over here, we required all those permits.
As I recall, yes, you were required to get additional permitting through the Connecticut DEEP. They also may need to approach the Zoning Commission for a coastal area management review. Bill Mulholland would make that determination and advise accordingly.
So can I ask a question and clarify too? So where the Phragmites are, that is coastal wetland. So that's not our jurisdiction. We're just talking about on the other side of the road.
That's correct. I believe the marsh, even though the Phragmites, and it is interesting, as we know that salt water, Phragmites have a difficult time growing in salt water. So the fact that there are Phragmites there on the salt marsh suggests that that area is being inundated with fresh water frequently. Right. So it literally, it's the interface between the inland wetland and the coast.
Which I think from a learning standpoint for the commission too is just something to highlight. You know, look at what we're talking about, the convergence of what is inland and what is coastal. You know,
Yeah.
is it before the pipe? Is it halfway through the road? Is it on the other side of the road? Hey, you know, our agents saying Phragmites can't really grow all that well in salt water, and there they are. So there's a significant amount of fresh water over there. It's, you know, I don't mean to dork out on it, but that's kind of interesting, right?
Yeah.
You know, I think it's probably kind of brackish water.
Yeah.
And then I would also, you know, if they're going to cut down some of the Phragmites, what are they going to do with the Phragmites that they've cut down? Because the dump technically isn't supposed to accept that type of material.
Am I unmuted?
Yes. Yeah, there you are. Go ahead, Mr. Kennedy.
Yeah, well, that's what we're planning on doing, is just basically keeping it on the property and building it up there and putting a tarp over it to kill it. So and then after it's all done, then using that same material as fill dirt basically to, you know, for topsoil. And hopefully that, you know, after it's been covered with a tarp for a year or so, then it's going to just die away.
And how, after you cut it down, and this is something Mrs. Berger has a lot of experience with this. After you cut it down, are you going to black tarp the area that's cut down?
No, I'm going to just keep cutting that down basically. And just, if we pull it out, because I don't think it won't grow from cuttings, is what I believe. It grows from the roots. So if we pull any out from the roots, that's what will grow back. So we'd have to be very, you know, cautious about where we put those to maintain them from not coming back. But as far as the roots, it's just a matter of cutting it back, and hopefully the salt water, I almost think the salt water, most part of it already is killing it off, because it's not growing back as readily as it seemed like it used to. So, you know, once it's cut down, the salt water would basically take care of most of it, I believe. So long as we keep it maintained cutting.
Are you going to get in there with like the blade on a string trimmer kind of thing?
Yes, yes. Get some mud shoes and go out in there with a string trimmer and just cut them down.
And then what about to assist the drainage, that clearly the elevation is too high on the pipe? Are you going to get in there with a shovel to dig that out a bit? Is that the plan?
Well, I was looking at getting a backhoe in there just to get a couple of scoops out, because it's kind of deep right in there. I don't know how good a shovel would get in there to actually get it out quickly and, you know, easily.
I go back to Mr. Gaishel on this. I'm going to try and unmute you, Gary. Jen, there you go. So deep, and what is your recommendation?
Well, I would believe that I think I would agree with Mr. Schmidt. He certainly can go in there and start, you know, clearing out the pipe. But if he gets into a large area, well, then you're clearly in a regulated activity. I mean, technically, in my opinion, the activity is regulated. You're doing direct work in a wetland. So I have to advise the commission that technically he needs a permit. Thus, I advise the applicant to come before the agency.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if we're looking at the actual applications, you know, if we get to question 8, area of wetland to be disturbed, on 1, it's 200, area of water courses to be disturbed, it's 30 square feet. And then if we look at the other application, area of wetland to be disturbed, 5,000, area of water courses to be disturbed, 300 square feet. So there is going to be work done in the wetlands. You know, it says right now that they're not going to be adding any fill to the site, which is good, but if they are going to be digging up, then maybe we should require a permit. It just depends how much you end up having to dig, I think.
Yeah, Mr. Kennedy and Mrs. LaCour, you know, I think everyone here understands what you're trying to do.
Yeah, you're trying to do something good, for sure.
Just trying to maintain the existing, basically, because it's been overlooked for, well, I've been at this residence for 10 years, and I don't think anything's ever been done to it.
Right.
It hasn't. 10 years before that nothing was ever done to it, and now it's like, okay, this is not working.
No, and we agree, and we see the need. I think I speak for the commission. Someone stop me if you want. We see the need. We understand. It's apparent. But you know, as far as being able to say, yeah, go for it. If we do that for every single resident in town that lives on some water that has the same problem.
Right.
You imagine one guy's cutting down an oak tree, one guy's doing this, one guy's doing that. We really have to be careful there where we can't really just say have at it. Mr. Gaishel? Hold on,
I did have a question, because under section 4 of our regulations, subsection F, says the maintenance relating to any drainage pipe which existed before the effective date of any municipal regulations adopted pursuant to section 22A-42A of the Connecticut General Statutes or on July 1st, 1974, whichever is earlier, provided such pipe is on property which is zoned as residential, but which does not contain hydrophytic vegetation. So there is an out here, however,
But it
property
does contain
hydrophytic vegetation.
It does contain that.
So I think the next question is, do we know when the pipe was installed?
Yeah, it was before 1974.
A while back.
A while back.
When was it?
I don't even think there was any permitting then on them or anything. You just do it.
When was the clubhouse built? I mean, could we?
That's a good question, yeah.
Years ago.
It was in the 50s.
Yeah.
All right.
Can Mr. Gaishel, can you're the sleuth with GIS. Can you confirm here for the record that the clubhouse was put up in the 50s?
I don't know. Wait a second.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Tell us now.
They may have only had paper records then. But I know the subdivision in here was put in 54, I think. So exactly when they did the clubhouse within this, I'm not really sure.
Give me a second here.
So if we require them to have an application, what are they going to have to do differently than what they've already presented to us? You know, like what is going to...
I would anticipate that they would probably need to employ the services of a soil scientist or a wetland scientist to highlight the methodology in which the cleaning out of this pipe would occur.
But yeah, regardless of the timing, we're saying the vegetation is the issue regardless, yeah?
Yeah, the hydrophytic vegetation.
So that's Miss Brian, that's Brian and Alyssa, that's section 4.1 of East Lyme's regulations, which is the permitted uses as of right and non-regulated uses. Specifically, the one Mr. Gaishel was reading from was item F.
Gary, I'm going to interrupt you for just a minute. I did check the GIS. The GIS shows that the clubhouse was built in 1960.
Okay, so it has it there, but we have that vegetation going down the pipe or in the pipe, around the pipe. Yeah, is that the issue? Let me read it real quick. Maintenance, Mr. Gaishel did, but let's just pour over it a bit. Maintenance relating to any drainage pipe which existed before the effective date of any municipal regulations adopted pursuant to section 22A-42 of the Connecticut General Statutes or July 1st, 1974, whichever is earlier. Provided such pipe is on property which is zoned as residential, that would be a question. Jen, is it residential? I'm guessing it is, even though it's a club. But which does not contain hydrophytic vegetation for purposes. The pipe itself contain it or the area?
The area. That's how I would interpret that, right?
For purposes of this subdivision, maintenance means the removal of accumulated leaves, soil, and other debris, whether by hand or machine, while the pipe remains in place.
I think we technically kind of do need to have this be within our jurisdiction. We're talking about the 5,000 square feet, like all of these areas that are technically in the wetlands. Sometimes we're making decisions where we're looking at the upland review. This is directly in the wetlands. And if we are going to be, removing matter, it might be good to have a soil scientist just advise this process. Does anybody else feel like relatively on the same page? I understand you're trying to do the right thing and you're trying to fix things and, get rid of some of that Phragmites and clear out this pipe, which I think is good. But since it is directly in that area, I think that it might make sense to have the permit because it is on the wetlands.
And I agree with what you're saying, and I unfortunately I just feel for the applicants because it's pretty straightforward, and they seem like very honest, well-intended people, and you can see the problem. It's bloody obvious, but I don't think we have, again, the jurisdiction to say that he can get in that wetland, which is a coastal wetland, right, Mr. Gaishel?
Well, it's inland and coastal. It's like we're kind of right on the edge of both. There definitely is inland in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe actually if you look at it, there's kind of inland wetlands, coastal wetlands, and tidal wetlands.
Right.
All in the same area. So it kind of, that's why I figured I'd go, any advice we can get to make sure we do things right and appropriate. And
oh, that's good. We appreciate that. Yeah.
We're trying to do as minimal as possible. And then once we do that, we see that there needs to be more, then we'll have to take the next step. Is what I was looking at. Just cleaning out the
So can I ask a question?
And, seeing where we go from there.
Phyllis?
Is this property owned by the Giants Neck Heights Association? Part of it?
Yes. It's kind of weird because one side is on 21 Marshfield Road.
Yeah.
And then where the driveway itself is, it's basically nobody owns it because it's an access road. And the town named it but never approved it as a town road. And then on the other side where the coastal wetlands is, that's on the Giants Neck Heights Association property.
So the monies for that type of work on the other side would come through the association then?
Yes.
Okay.
The associations, because the access road basically is to get to the association clubhouse. Right. They're taking care of all of it.
Yeah.
Is what they're looking.
Ted, did you have a comment too?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to agree with you, Rosemary. I mean, Mr. Kennedy, we all agree about your intentions. It just seems pretty clear, though, that when somebody needs to dig in the wetlands, they just need to get a permit,
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Mr. Gaishel, could you summarize your recommendation for this so that we might align with how you want, this should be handled?
Well, I think based on the information before you, the site walk that we saw, and there's clear evidence of hydrophytic vegetation on the site, that is clearly not an exempt activity and therefore requires a permit.
So I guess that's our answer, yeah?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think that makes the most sense. It's like if we're going to be policing people that are in the upland review, I think that we need to make sure that if people are carrying out activities directly on the wetlands, that they put an application forward.
Yeah. As much as we understand it, I mean, it's
to be consistent with our.
Yeah.
For the sake of consistency, Mr. Chair, I would take a motion on the item.
So I'll make a motion, a simple motion, that the applicants or both applicants, Mrs. Spang, in item C, the applicants 21 Marshfield Road and Creek Road, Giants Neck Heights Clubhouse, would make an application with both our agency and the Department of Environmental Protection in the state of Connecticut and any other, sorry, should I not say that?
I don't think we can.
Okay, we don't need to say that?
Just with your.
Just with ours.
Yeah, we Deep will enforce on their end if they need to.
Yeah, they'll figure it out.
No, thank you. So inland a application be made before this commission for the proposed activity, which is cleanup and maintenance, it seems.
I'll second that. Yep.
Are we clear on the, I'd like to go a little, I apologize for this. I'd hate to have to write it down too. Are we clear on the motion?
Motion for an application.
Yep.
Gary, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I just want to clarify if you're asking them to submit 2 separate applications or 1.
That was my question too.
I got a little off the rails there and said the deep thing. Our agent has clarified 1 application. Oh, as far as the 2 pieces.
Yes.
Two properties.
We agreed to combine them, so go ahead, Mr. Gaishel.
I would just recommend that the applicant submit one application and just list both properties.
Yes.
That's a good idea.
That could be clearing clearing the culvert in the access road between these two properties. That's kind of what it's really doing, because I think the culvert itself is not on anybody's property, but within the access road to the clubhouse property.
Okay, well, we can identify, I can work with you to identify.
Okay, I appreciate that.
How I label that right away.
Yeah.
Because that.
Yeah, because I wanted your help just to figure out exactly which application, because I got the applicant here, but
sure,
as far as where it's going to clean out the culvert.
Certainly, yeah. We'll have to figure out ownership on that right away, and figure out how to list that on your application.
Yeah.
But I think the intent is whatever you do, put it on one application.
Yeah.
Keep it simple. I think it'll cost you a little less that way. It might be $12 or whatever it be, but for efficiency, get it on one application for your own comfort. Mr. Gaishel, it sounds like, is comfortable in telling you how to do so.
Yes.
Great. So there's a motion and a second. Is it okay at this time if I, any other comments, Mr. Gaishel? Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in there. We're okay?
Yep, I have none.
All right. So all in favor from the top, Ms. Chantrell,
Aye.
Ms. Osfeld,
Aye.
Ms. Berger,
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt,
Aye.
Ted Koch,
Aye.
and Doreen Ryan.
Aye.
All right. And myself, aye. We're all in favor of this. Thank you very much for your patience with this and also your diligence. If only everyone were so careful and cautious and
Conscientious.
thank you very much about doing it the right way. Again, if I might summarize my opinion, and it seems the commission would love to say, yes, should have at it and clean it up, but we need to do this the right way. It's, unfortunately, we're here to make sure that we're not worried about the Brian Kennedys of the world, but unfortunately the rules are the rules, as Mom said.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for your going through this Zoom thing. It's fun.
Thank you. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
Who's the second Gary Gaishel in the meeting? There's like 2 people labeled as Gary Gaishel. Does anybody else notice that?
Yes, it's been there all night. It's been there all night.
Gary was having some technical difficulties
Okay.
earlier, so he wanted to make sure he had a
We
backup.
just have this like shadow Gary just chilling.
I'm glad I'm not the only one, though. Like, I was having the same thing. Like, my computer would not get in.
He probably tried to log in from 2 different devices
Got it. It's like, what's going on?
and then never logged out of the first one when he was successful the second time.
Perfect. All right. So moving on. Any new business to be added to this? Mr. Gaishel, do you have anything new you'd like to bring in?
I don't have any new business at this time.
All right. Do you have any old business?
I'm old.
We got Schmidt. I'd like to make a motion to introduce Mr. Schmidt into the record as old business. No, I'm joking.
No.
So then we're moving on to reports. So in item A of the chairman's reports, I have a couple things that I have to bring our attention to. Few little items of curiosity. And I wanted to, again, see if I can't get lucky enough. When we were at the Marshfield location, I don't know if any of my fellow commissioners noticed this, so I'm going to share my screen. Here we go, ready? But something I noticed that was quite concerning, here we are telling Mr. Brian Kennedy, you can't clean up your Phragmites, but what you have at the dock of, this is right behind the, if you continue to the water, right behind the location we were.
Sure.
Boat launch.
It's a boat
Thank you.
ramp.
Yep, thanks, guys. We have significant recent filling and changing of the topography to this, I believe, south-northwesterly side of the boat launch here. What you're seeing here are scratches from an excavator on rocks. There's a significant amount of sedimentation in the marsh. I'm not sure, maybe Jen
Yeah,
can,
what the heck's going on there?
yeah, maybe Jen can figure out, 'cause she's quick on that GIS thing. If you look at the overpass, Jen, you see in this picture here, it's the property right here closest. So basically they're between the train tracks and the clubhouse. So I just grabbed a couple pictures just by happenstance. There's my finger. That's a nice one.
You giving us the finger?
Yes, you know it. But you can't really see it as well as you can in person, but this whole line's been pushed forward about 6 or 7 feet. Rocks have been moved. There's a big stockpile of rocks there. And this whole lot, which is clearly within the upland review area, has been scrubbed, leveled. And right there, can you see from my mouse, there's something that's yellow? That's the excavator that's parked back by the house.
I think that needs to be investigated.
Yeah, what's going on there?
Yeah. What's up here?
Yeah.
What's up?
What's up? So,
Do you have an address for it?
do we have an address, Jen?
I'm trying to find one right now.
It's kind of funny.
Unfortunately, well, yeah.
Maybe that's the land that's not owned by anybody.
Well, technically, it looks like that is owned by the railroad.
Ah.
However, that house, the property for that house doesn't go to that spot that we're looking at. They may have cleared it, but it doesn't go to that location.
Do
That
you know
house doesn't own that right there.
Can you tell us whose house it is?
Hang on.
I wouldn't mention any names right here, but
Yeah, maybe the address.
14 Park Lane in Giants Neck Heights.
Okay.
14 Park Lane. So that was just something I wanted to note. Mr. Gashel, if you could look into that for us.
That is kind of curious. Yeah.
Pretty obvious violation without a permit right into the ocean.
So if I may, I am aware of the site. I've reported it to Bill Mulholland, our zoning official. He is investigating that as it is within the coastal area management. I'll take a closer look at it to see if it falls within the 100-foot upland review of that freshwater wetland on the other side of the clubhouse.
Right. Yeah, there you go.
sounds like it's covered already.
Yeah.
It may be under coastal area management. I'm not aware if Mr. Mulholland has made contact with the property owner or not. I did visit the site with the town engineer when I first noticed it, and Mr. Kennedy had invited me out to look at the pipe, and that's when I saw that. I also received a complaint from a budding neighbor.
Oh, great. All right, good.
Okay. On the case.
All right, maybe we could talk if we could get an update on that for our next meeting. That would be something we could put on the agenda. Is that all right?
Sure.
Thank you. So the address again was 14 Park Lane, Giant Neck Heights.
Well, they don't own the property that is impacted.
Well, we're not really sure, are we?
It's pretty clear.
It's owned by the railroad.
It's owned by the railroad, yeah.
Well,
But
how far does the railroad own?
Gary Upton, you have to transfer back host abilities to me in order for me to be able to share my screen.
I refuse. Hold on. Where are you over there, Jen? There you go. Should be good.
Okay. All right, so the area that you're talking about is right here.
Yeah.
This is all owned by the railroad.
Oh, yeah, I see.
So like I said, it may have been cleared by this 14 Park Lane here, but all of that waterway from about halfway down that dock, the water level's really low in this photograph.
Yes.
You can see all of this is owned by the railroad.
Just
So-
as a point of interest, is that used by all the residents of Giant Neck to launch their boats, or?
I have no idea.
Some, yeah.
Just curious.
Good question. Yeah.
So
that's helpful. Thank you for the video.
Yeah, perfect.
Yep.
Great. All right, and much in this, so any other questions or discussions on that, guys? No. So much in this vein, there's a similar thing that, came to our attention, and hopefully Mr. Gaishel can comment on this. When we were at our site walk for 297 Boston Post Road, I just heard other commission members talking about what was the past application from some time ago. There's some buildings that are on the other side of the boat launch. So we're here at the 297, then we've got the boat launch, and then there's essentially where Paz has some 3 buildings that have, 2 of them I believe have some retail elements, and then the back one, it looks like a residential piece. And the comment was, that's not what we approved, and those buildings are too close to the water. If I may, I'm going to share my screen and just show you what I'm referring to. So that it can be, pardon me for a second. This is the view, share screen, PAS, BPR. So you guys got a view of this thing. And again, what alerted me the day we were there, I just happened to see the yellow of the excavator off in the woods, and I was like, what's going on? I went on the public property and I saw this. Again, I wasn't over this meeting. I didn't have anything to do with the original application because I was on a little sabbatical per se, a little hiatus from the agency. It's okay, go ahead, throw your rotten fruit and vegetables now. But I went over and took a look, and here's the boat launch, and here's the building, and the comment, again, here's my finger. That's why I didn't show that picture. There's the water, someone's nice pool, and just wanted to show that and ask for clarification on those statements, just so that we're all on the same page. If we could, Mr. Gaishel, could you clarify if those statements are incorrect or not?
Well, I could not at this time. What I will do, though, is I can ask Mr. Pizzalia for an as-built, if you'd like, and we can verify the location of those buildings. I believe per his zoning application and his approval there that the zoning official or the zoning commission required an as-built. I'll certainly double check with Mr. Mulholland, but that's one way to determine exactly where the buildings are. We can compare that as-built to the approved plan.
So the commission members, if they would, are there any commission members that have any comments on this?
I'm sorry, I'm missing. What's the issue? I don't understand what the issue is.
The comments on our site walk when we were inspecting 297 Boston Post Road was that this building is not, the remembrance of the memory of the fellow commissioners, they'd said, oh, geez, that's not what we approved, that to sit right there, that close to the water. And maybe it is, who knows? I just thought it was of note, and like, we don't want to, oh, oops, there's a huge building right on the water, and that wasn't what was on the plan. Does that make sense, Dave? Sorry.
I guess I missed that. Did I get there late? I don't think I did. I don't remember seeing that last Saturday.
Yeah, it's across through the boat launch. You have to be from the boat launch. You're on the other side over here.
Maybe I fell asleep.
Dave, we didn't visit that
We
site.
weren't physically on that site, so don't worry.
Oh, okay. So we weren't there. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't think I've ever been there, and I'm going, this doesn't look like anything I've ever seen. Sorry.
Yeah,
You didn't. Don't worry.
As we spun out of there, I grabbed a picture of it. So I said, you know what? I think if people have concerns that things aren't being done the way that they were approved, why not? Let's just see. Let's find out if that's true or not. Maybe it's inaccurate,
Mr. Gaishel, if we get an as-built and then it differs from the proposal by like an amount of feet that is significant to us, then what would happen?
We take an enforcement action,
To do what? Take the building down? Move the building?
potentially. Or he comes in and applies for a permit to put the building where it's at.
Won't be the first time a building's been taken down that was put up without a permit.
All right. And how, just out of curiosity, how often does this commission ask for those?
Never.
Well, is that within our purview or planning or zoning or?
It's within your purview to ask for as-built, absolutely. We can ask.
But we never have?
I don't recall that the commission having asked for them. I think we get them on the larger commercial projects. We ask them just flat out. For instance, like the Costco and the Gateway projects, we get the as-built for those.
So essentially, a lot of this, once it leaves our meeting, a lot of it is kind of based on trust that they're going to do what they told us.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Correct. Yep, you're relying on their engineers, their surveyors, and staff oversight. Basically, going out to the site and comparing plans that were approved by commissions with what's being built on the ground.
Right.
And if we ask for the as-built plan, that doesn't make anybody else have to come into our meetings, right? It just allows us to have a look on the backside.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Seems.
I think it's a good idea.
All right. So, Mr. Gaishel, if Mr. Gaishel was quite certain that it was all done, your original response was you weren't quite sure, right? You said we should really find out.
Right. I mean, here we are at a public meeting. I can't go on the record saying this is a fact until I. Right. So I need to confirm that.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I think that's wise. Cool. All right. So we'll get it. We don't need a motion for that request. You can just take care of that for us for our next meeting.
Yes. I assume this is direction from the commission to do just that.
Unless anyone wants to say they don't like that idea, I think we're all in alignment with just getting an as-built for that location. Could we outline just for the record which location that is? Does anyone know the address?
Is that 285 Boston Post Road, I believe? Or 283? It's one or the other.
It's 285.
All right, so Mr. Gaishel believes it's 285. If we can get an as-built for what we believe to be 285, and specifically the interest is the building that looks like it's about 10, 20 feet from the water.
Yeah, it's 285.
So if you go down there, you'll see like the crew team's boathouse, it's well back off the water. You see the other buildings are well back off the water. And there is that dark brown residential with a pool that's approximately in the similar region of Mr. Pizzaglia's property there. But this one really just, it's right there on the edge of the water. So again, no interest of mine other than there were two people that commented at our site walk that they were concerned that it wasn't what was originally approved. And let's see if that's true or not. All right. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. Moving on. How does everyone feel about a 2-minute break? Because I got to hit the little boys' room. Yeah. So I'd like to make a motion to take a quick break for 2 minutes. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor? Chantrell, Miss Chantrell?
Aye.
Rosemary, yes.
Aye.
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 Dave.
Dave, who else? Ted. Oh, look, people are disappearing. Doreen, you good? Aye.
Yes, aye.
Mr. Koch, aye.
Aye.
All right, so we're all in favor. We're gonna take let's say 5 minutes max. The time right now is 9:06.
Later.
Sorry, what's that?
Later, he said later.
I'll see. I'll be back in just a few moments also.
All right.
Hey, Gary, did you get your kitchen outlets to work yet?
I haven't even started looking at them.
Resume, was that an intended pun or not? No.
No, that was for us to stop the idle chatter.
All right, so I'd like to call our meeting back to order. The time is 9:13 p.m. on Monday, June 8th, 2020. This is the East Lyme Inland Wetlands Agency, and we just took approximately a 7 or 8 minute intermission break. And here we are back at it. We are at item number 9 under reports, the Inland Wetland Agents Report. At this time, I'm going to turn the microphone over to our one and only Mr. Gary Gaishel.
I'll report that I issued a permit for 21 Fairhaven Road for deck extension. That was a 12-foot by 24-foot deck. It's within the upland review area. 16 Egret Road, I issued a permit for a shed, roughly 12-foot by 20. It's prefabricated, again within the upland review area. And that is it. And that brings me back to the enforcement part of my report. We went out and we visited 297 Boston Post Road, and I would leave it to the commission to decide whether or not that matter has been resolved or if they'd prefer to pursue additional enforcement.
Can I just ask a question about that? Because I'm not familiar with what the permit states that they're in violation of.
So you want to look at the actual permit that was issued?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so that, I don't have a scanned copy of that, but I do have the permit with me. Basically, the permit was issued on 9/12/2016. It's set to expire on 9/18/2021. And the activity permitted was a stockpile up to 100 cubic yards of topsoil within 100 feet of a water body.
Are there any other permitted use or applied for uses on the site, Gary?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. So 100 cubic foot stockpile.
That's not much.
Yard. Sorry. Okay. Is what we. All right. Sorry, Kristen, were you still asking a question? I apologize.
Yeah, so it says, so I didn't go to the site walk, but I did go visit the site today, and there was a lot of construction equipment and vehicles still on the property. So are those permitted in any way?
Not by the wetland agency.
Yeah, I was just kind of taken aback because it sounded like in our last meeting that everything had been cleaned up, you know, and then we went there and there were like 10 to 12 heavy machinery items. And I was just like, what? That really didn't match up with what we heard in the last meeting, which I thought was kind of weird.
I'm between a use issue, which is a zoning matter. So my suggestion is that we send the zoning official a letter asking him to go investigate the use.
Yeah, and I mean, this has been an enforcement thing that's been on our agenda for about a year now. I think it showed up on the agenda in June of 2019. So, I mean, this is a year that this has been sitting there. It's kind of ridiculous.
If I may, I'm just going to get us all on the same page here real quick and share my screen.
Yeah, that's fine.
There we go. So this is a screen share of
nice car.
We won't say whose car it is, right? You know,
I don't know whose car it is.
But here we are on the site. We've got towards the road. There's this this vehicle, snow plow, salting, you know, equipment. These dump trucks. Same over here. continuing on, some old equipment in the woods, just showing where the scrapings or the reclaimings from the road are meeting the vegetation. Obviously, that's inhibiting the growth of the vegetation in the area. Have a little, probably antifreeze can covering the who knows what exhaust pipe. More of the same. There it is. Don't know what's going on there. I'm guessing this is the stockpile originally, Mr. Gaishel?
Correct.
Which appears to have two machines, that large excavator, or looks like a forestry type machine, and then the smaller Muzzy machine. Is that the brand? This truck. And then here we are, for myself, probably the more concerning area, these 3 or 4 vehicles sitting down by the water. Here, there's a nice out of focus picture of the ground. This picture is off of the front of this machine here, this link belt. While it's not gallons of, petroleum product, it's, this is actually also off the front of the link belt. It's a, the creosote soaked telephone pole. Another machine. And this here, let me see. One thing I had done in these, just for context for everybody, if this thing opens, I walk down to the water, and then I walk away. And I'm going to take some steps. 1. Question, can you hear the audio on the video?
Yeah, I can't see the video though. It's not playing. It's like frozen.
Yeah, I paused it. Can you hear the video and the audio, or my voice?
Your voice.
Okay. So I'm walking away in paces.
5, 6, 7. No, but I can't even see it now though, but it's still frozen.
11, 12, 13. So this, can you see the frozen picture, Rosemary? Do you see the frozen video of this?
I just see a few leaves.
Okay. Does anyone else have a problem seeing it? Kristen, can you see what I'm playing?
It's a split screen.
Yeah, I can hear what you're playing. I don't see the movie that you're playing, just the
technological problems.
If I may,
yes, sir.
I think that what we're presented with here is a large number of large construction vehicles in varying states of disrepair with, we don't know what kinds of fluids in them, gasoline, antifreeze, or whatever else is there, that are decomposing right on the border of a pond.
Right.
And even so, I think that it directly relates to our jurisdiction, and even the part of it where there was a permit has a gigantic construction vehicle in it, sticking out, looking like a dinosaur, kind of about as big as like a brontosaurus.
Two of them. There's 2 of them in there.
All right, 2 of them. So
brontosaurus.
I think that it seems to me, and I had never been there before, but just standing there and looking around, that this is clearly a violation of what we've asked him to do.
Yeah.
So I would say that we should continue to enforce this however we can, and send a letter about the use of it to our to that other committee that Mr. Gaishel recommended.
Zoning Commission.
I don't see any other way around it.
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing this enforcement for a year and nothing has happened, So like.
So the next step, if you look, I've issued a notice of violation. The next step would be the issuance of a cease and desist order, which upon the direction of the commission, I will gladly do. And that said, the commission also has the ability to issue fines. And if the commission would like to do so, you may.
Well, you know, we've talked about this for the last year. I know we emphasized fines and we dragged our feet. Now, I mean, I would like to see a list of all the vehicles and the equipment and whether or not it's registered, because the town is losing tax money by having this stuff kind of hidden there. And if it's not registered, then it should be towed out and go to a dump or something. It's in violation.
I agree.
Is that under our jurisdiction?
Yeah, let's be.
It's within 100 feet of the water.
I mean, I think I understand there's a few pieces going on there.
Yeah, there's a couple things happening.
Coming off of Mr. Koch said, I agree that we should enforce this. Going back to what Mr. Gaishel said, I think it's time for a cease and desist. I don't think, out of fairness, we do cease and desist and fine at the exact same time. I think we should C&D for 30 days, and perhaps we could talk about fines thereafter at our next meeting.
Chairman, just upon the issuance of a cease and desist order, we have 10 days to hold a show cause hearing. We'll have to set up a Zoom meeting to do that. That's where the applicant has the right to come to that show cause and plead his case as to why he's not in violation or why he thinks he's not in violation. That said, it doesn't necessarily remedy the order unless the commission decides that the issue's resolved.
Okay.
So, you know, that's where he can have dialogue with the agency, and this is what I'm doing to correct it, or not, or whatever it is he's doing. So.
Well, and I think that we gave him that opportunity. I know we haven't gone to the cease and desist level yet, but you know, he came to us and said he was going to clean this up. I'd say what, 3-4 months ago, and it's still there.
And going.
Can I say something first? I was under the impression that it was the contractor, but actually, I think we should probably go to the owner of the property, which is somebody by the name of Smith.
Al Smith, yeah.
So Gary, shouldn't that be the route you should go?
Yeah.
To the property owner?
Yeah, I issued the notice to both Al Smith and Jason Pizzaglia.
I think it should be both, because it's the owner of the property and the owner. Well, like there's two, the physical land and the machines. It seems like both make sense.
Correct. So to remain consistent with the enforcement action, you cite both.
Yeah.
I can hold the contractor just as liable as I can the landowner.
And I think it's the right time for him to come in and plead his case now, because now we've all seen it and we can understand exactly what he's talking about. And, you know, if he has an explanation, you know, we can hear it.
I mean, and it is a zoning issue also, as you say, to me, but within our purview, these machines are leaking diesel fuel and or gasoline and or hydraulic fluid and or battery acid into whatever. And, you know, to me, this looks, you know, a generous person might call it an antique construction equipment museum. I would call it a junkyard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to make sure we get back to what, you know, Phyllis mentioned, the tax element. Well, I mean, I logically agree as you know, someone that lives in town. I think we can't really get into that, right? And Doreen had said, hey, you know, a little bit of a careful. I agree, but yeah, like most important,
registered, yeah.
Yeah, most importantly, let's get the stuff out of there polluting the water. I mean, it doesn't take much of a kindergarten degree to know that, you know, greasy things sitting next to the pond are going straight in the pond, and the whole area is wetland, is it not, Mr. Gaishel?
Correct. It's pretty much a peninsula surrounded by wetlands and watercourse.
Yeah.
And all the kids are, you know, literally, you know, I'd say less than 100 feet away at the boat launches, doing rowing, doing sports. It's like right there.
And Mr. Pizzaglia's own, I mean, I think he would imagine he'd agree that my interpretation, the people that are going to eventually buy the property that sits right on the beautiful lake there are only 2 properties over and are recipients of that pollution. You know, it does seem like it needs to be, in my opinion, you know, like as cleaned up, and let's hear what the guy has to say about it. We should talk about it. So how do we procedurally, guys, Mr. Gaishel and team, how do we want to, if we C&D, I think with no fines, I don't think that's fair to do off the rip, right? And I don't, you know, do we C&D and have a show cause hearing in 10 days? Are you guys okay with that?
Yep.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
So we'll have a special meeting exclusively for a show cause hearing regarding this, the violation on 297 Boston Post Road, Al Smith owner, Jason Pizzaglia, other outside storage of equipment, construction materials, and the stockpiling of earthen materials, including but not limited to yard debris, mulch, wood chips, gravel, topsoil, and other woody debris within 100 feet of a water course without or in violation of an inland wetlands permit. What date do we propose to do this?
So I would not set the date. I would just direct staff to schedule it because it's going to be based on, I have to issue an order to start that procedure. So once the order is issued and sent certified mail, it'll be 10 days from that date. So today is Monday. I certainly can do that tomorrow, probably get it in the mail by Wednesday.
So do you need a motion for a cease and desist order?
No,
Okay.
I think the consensus of the commission. I would just say, more specifically that the order is going to be specific in that you want the unregistered vehicles or any vehicles that are unregistered removed.
I think anything that's leaking fluid currently and is rusting and falling apart needs to be removed, right? Is everybody on the same page?
Otherwise,
if I may, I think we're stepping into dangerous territory using our own judgment as to what may or may not be a pollutant or a problem. I do think we should have a specialist. I don't know what type of specialist, but someone should go in there at our direction at clearly the violator's expense to show what needs to be remediated or cleaned up. It's a little dangerous for us to say, oh, we don't like that. We don't, you know what I mean? Am I speaking logically? Please, someone tell me if I'm not.
I think I understand what you're saying. I mean, again, the landowner or the applicant here, being for Mr. Pizzalia, might come in and say, "Hey, I can provide you documentation that these vehicles aren't leaking." I mean, I guess the argument there is, I had a gravel driveway and it was next to a wetland. I parked my car there. It's registered and it leaks oil like a sieve. What do I do? Is that how much of that can be policed?
I agree, other than, we're in a commercial situation, obviously, and they're not household quantities, clearly, right?
Right.
No, but some of those things have been there for years and years.
Yeah.
Some of them are older than me.
So, I think if it doesn't run or if it's unregistered, it gets removed. And then anything else that remains, I think you direct them to say, you get a permit for it.
Well, Gary, I would be weary of making sure that they're all registered, because like that link belt, those machines are not always registered. That's not, they're moved on trailers. They don't have a registration.
Correct.
So, that's a dangerous, you don't want to make that an exclusion to having them, because, there's a lot of things on there that are not registered that might be used on a daily or weekly or monthly basis still. I'm just weary of going there, that's all.
And also, you could register something and then just park it next to the pond and let it rot all into the pond.
Yeah.
I mean, for our purposes, whether it's registered or not doesn't matter. From a zoning or planning point, that probably does matter. But, if it's leaking and polluting the wetlands, whether it's registered or unregistered, I personally don't care.
Right. And if it's within that 100 feet, right? So if something's within 100 feet, leaking, rusting, decomposing, that's problematic.
Mr. Gaishel, what do our regulations state as for if we have an enforcement issue like this? How, who bears the cost if there's I really just feel like, guys, it's dangerous for us to pick out what's a problem and say is or isn't. This is. I feel like someone should get in there and do that for us. I
think if that's the direction you want to go, you issue a cease and desist order and say, hey, everything but the 100 cubic yards of material has to go. There's no permit for it.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with that. Cease and desist in order to show cause why he should have all that stuff there.
Right.
Right. And then if he thinks that he should be able to have it, then he can file for a permit.
Yep.
Correct.
But I mean, where,
That's his
okay,
municipal remedy.
yep. Where do we stop? I mean, the big tank machine that's up against the building, that's all in the wetland area.
If it's in the upland review and it's not permitted, it's technically not allowed. So get it out or permit it. Yeah, you cover the whole lot.
And I mean, we've tried to be very easy on this one, I think, for the lack of a better way of putting it, and we've been very understanding. That stuff's heavy. It's got to go somewhere. I don't think that's the somewhere. If it were on a farm, even up in northern section of town, we'd still be concerned. But if there wasn't the big lake sitting next to it, I think it would be a little less concerning. So at C and D, we're saying to remove the equipment, all of the equipment, with the exception of the pile of the permitted pile. Are you with us, Ted? That's what you were saying?
Make it plain and simple. To remove anything that's not permitted to be there by permit or land use regulation.
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt, yep. And do we need a motion for that? You don't want to motion that?
Gary said he does not need one.
All right.
As long as so if I have that correctly though, but you were saying remove anything that is not permitted.
Correct.
That's easy.
Makes sense.
All right. I feel like, just for the record, I would like to make a motion to issue a cease and desist for this property at 297 Boston Post Road. That all articles, with the exception of the permitted activity being the stockpile or whatever the heck it is. Sue, I'm trying to, let's break that thing down real quick. Motion, Chairman Upton motions, cease and desist for the violation at 297 Boston Post Road. And we are ceasing and desisting any activity that is not, Mr. Koch, help me, that is not permitted.
Yes.
Very simple.
Are we good?
Yes.
Do I hear a second?
I will second that.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. All in favor from the top down, Ms. Chantrell?
Aye.
Is there any other further discussion? I'm sorry, I'm supposed to always say that. We always kind of do this backwards. Any further discussion? All right, so I've got Ms. Chantrell is an aye, Rosemary Osfeld is an aye. Ms. Berger?
Aye.
All right. Mr. Schmidt?
Aye.
Let me see, Mr. Koch?
Aye.
Doreen Ryan?
Aye.
And myself making the motion, aye. It's unanimous. We are in favor of the cease and desist. And Mr. Gaishel is going to issue that formally in writing, shall we say, this week for certain?
Correct.
All right, so the week ending, and we will revisit, week ending June 12th, thank you. And we'll revisit the timeline and whatnot as instructed by staff after they've done their work on this on the back end. Thank you, guys. Anything else on that matter?
So when is our next regular meeting?
July 13th.
Well, yeah, that's not our that's our next meeting, July 13th.
Regular meeting.
Is that our regular meeting? Actually, sorry, you might be right.
Yes.
That was our regular, you're right, sorry. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that. All right, anything else on that matter? We're gonna move on to the next item.
Okay.
All right, let me pull up the website so I have this correspondence to read in to the record. Guys. Let me see. Zoom, knock it off. It definitely freaks out when you make it do too much.
Get a real computer. Come on, Gary.
Yeah, right.
Get with the 90s. Oh, wait a minute. It's 2020.
All right, so under the correspondence section, correspondence from the first selectman, there are a few other items of correspondence that were added to the online materials on the East Lyme Town Hall website. I'm not going to sit here and belabor the latter responses to the first letter, but on our agenda is a correspondence from the first selectman, which is, I'm going to read in real quick for you guys. It's a letter to our commission. I believe all the commission members have read this. June 4th, 2020, to the Inland Wetlands Commission members. For over 2 weeks, I've asked the chair of your commission to meet with me, Mr. Gaishel, and the town attorney prior to your next meeting. I was compelled to ask for this meeting after reading a string of emails from your chair to the town staff where the tone was quite negative, disrespectful, and hostile. No matter how frustrated we might be with a person, the system, or an applicant, we should always remain professional and respectful. I feel that the line has been crossed. The purpose for the requested meeting was quite clear: to reset communications between the chair, staff, and council. I also wanted to lay out my expectations of following established protocols and the long-standing precedent of scheduling meetings, publicized public hearings, and the partnership that must be observed between the commission and the town hall. This was not a meeting to discuss substance or agenda items, just procedure. The chair refused to meet and then became hostile with me. I would be quite concerned with any commission that displays a renegade/rogue attitude. This is the first time I've witnessed this behavior in the 21 years I have volunteered and worked for the town. There exists an expectation and precedent for the chair of a commission and the staff to work together. Sadly, this is not happening with your commission. As commissioners, no one will ever tell you how to vote, but you are expected to listen and consider the advice of town council, our professional staff, and state agencies. They have an obligation to guide commissioners on legal matters, on what is required when rendering a decision, and the ramifications of decisions on a broader scale. Disregarding and even resisting this guidance could potentially cost the taxpayers of our town significant damage. This is not what you were appointed to do. You took an oath to serve our town and make decisions based on what was best for our citizens. I am asking each commission member to keep this in mind when sitting as an Inland Wetlands Commissioner. In closing, I sincerely thank you for your service to our beloved town. I am available anytime for discussion. Most sincerely, Mark C. Nickerson, First Selectman. As I said, there was a response letter from myself, which I won't go into the weeds of the discussion. It's on the record, a PDF of the full back and forth regarding the meeting. This is a letter from myself to the commission. Dear fellow commission members, dated June 5th, 2020. Regretfully, in response to the letter from our first selectman dated June 4th, 2020, in which the selectman makes a variety of accusations regarding his interactions with me, I must unfortunately enter into the record the chain of communication that came before that letter. Also, be it clear that I have not met with Mr. Nickerson or spoken to him on the phone. All correspondence has been in writing. As for meeting with him and or staff, I asked to do so by Zoom. Please find attached to this letter our email chain. I thank every one of you for your service and apologize in advance for having to deal with issues like this. I will let the record speak for itself. Thank you, Gary Upton, Chair, Inland Wetlands, East Lyme. And with that read into the record, I would myself, if it's okay, sorry guys, let me just hack through here. There was further correspondence from Ms. Chantrell that wasn't given in time technically for this meeting. There was something about that, so I won't read that into the record, although it is available on the same resource section of the website. Moving forth from the correspondence, unless there's any comments or questions, I do want to let everyone know that I did get to speak with Mr. Nickerson myself this morning after reaching out to him again. We were able to have a phone call, and I think that everything's in line, and as is exampled by this meeting, I feel that we're working fairly well together, and I hope that we can continue in that vein. I do really thank everyone for the work they're doing, and I know that Jen and Gary and the team, they do their job, and it's not an easy job. If there's not anything else, maybe we hear a motion to adjourn our meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
How about a show of hands? That'll work for video, right? Looks like all fellow commission members are in favor of adjourning the meeting. Thanks, guys. And our next regular meeting is on
July 13th.
July 13th, which we will have a public hearing for an update to our regulations.
Yes, but I'm going to put a note in here. Make sure you all pay attention to your emails so that when I send out the cease and desist, you are aware of when that show cause hearing will be, because it'll be probably within the next 10 to 15 days. So
Gotcha.
just keep that in mind. That you'll need to keep an eye out on your emails so that you can schedule accordingly.
Back on that matter, thank you, Miss Lindo. It's June 8th. If it takes the week to send a notice, Mr. Gaishel, and our next meeting is July 13th, I feel like I will start hearing that we might as well add it to that. Is that? No? Okay.
I would just
All
say
right.
the show cause hearing and just deal with that item separately.
Okay.
I don't think you want to have a public hearing on that with the show cause hearing, and
At the
I
same
think it would be too confusing.
I think we can add it to the July 13th meeting for further discussion if we don't have a final resolution on the show cause hearing, but it'll remain on the agenda.
Okay. Everyone else like that idea? Keep the two separate? Does that sound okay with everyone?
Yes.
That makes sense.
Okay. All right. So we'll continue as we planned. I just wanted to bring that up in the event the timelines get a little smudged. I mean, like we did with the public hearing for the regulations. Things sometimes take a little longer than, we expect, right? So just trying to be mindful of that so that we're not, trying to push you guys to get something out that, needs a minute or two to happen. But it sounds like that's not a problem. So we'll carry on. Thanks, everyone. We're done here. The time is 9:45 on June 8th, 2020, and we are going to adjourn our inland wetlands meeting. Thanks everyone for showing up. Good. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
All right, everybody.
Gary Upton, when you end the meeting,
Yes.
I'm going to ask you to upload the video to the cloud. Just
Are
click
you
yes.
still? Did I not share it back to you? Did I not share the usage back to you?
It's still showing you as the host.
Let me. What the heck? I think I want you to be in charge of that. Ready?
Go ahead.
I just think from a town standpoint, if it breaks on, and we know my computer is being problematic, so let's not do that.